I think one of my favorite things about running fantasy RPGs is the treasure. As a game master and a fantasy fan, I get excited about those mythic items that the characters find during their adventures if they're not outright specifically questing for. Magic or mundane, the human mythos is full of these artifacts. From Arthurian legend, the mighty sword of Excalibur, to the knight's quest for the Holy Grail, to Heracles donning the Nemean lion cloak for its protective abilities and its intimidating presence. Treasure is just cool and exciting, and it comes with all of these built-in moments of anticipation. Whether it's a video game or a tabletop role-playing game, there is this moment of excitement around finding out what did you get from the treasure hoard. That's why I think a lot of treasures in D&D are a huge wasted opportunity. You have this moment in time where everyone is paying attention to you, the game master, as you are describing the treasure hoard that they've found. And that's a really rare thing. We like to think that people are engaged with our games and are always focused on it, but the truth is people's attention span will wax and wane over time. They may get up to take a break or use the bathroom. Sometimes they'll take a look at their phone. They're not listening to us 100% of the time, nor is that to be fully expected. But when it comes to treasure, everyone is paying attention to you. That's why it feels like such a huge disservice for the reward to be 500 gold pieces and a +1 sword. You have their undivided attention, and frankly, it's squandered on such descriptions. I think we can do better. I think we can use these treasure parcel moments to help improve the engagement of our players and further drive additional adventuring opportunities for them at the gaming table. Hi, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall, and today we're talking about how to put the value back into your treasure. So I hit on this in the intro, but bland, mundane treasures are doing your game no service. Now, sometimes they're necessary. I get it. Not everything is unique and cool. And if you're playing in RPGs where 1 gold coin equals 1 XP, your players will definitely be happy to see those coins. But we should aim to have interesting items in our treasure hoard. Now, obviously, there are 2 main varieties here: mundane items and magical items. Mundane treasures are anything that the players will value for their intrinsic monetary value. Things like coins, gems, jewelry, and so on. These things are valuable, but they hardly get the imagination turning. Rather than a gold bracelet with diamonds on it, what if the players find a bracer in the design of a flickering flame decorated with red and orange gemstones that make it shine like a flame? The bracer is a clear sign of status and renown among the flame speakers of the third blaze. That's a bit more interesting and possibly has some intrigue to it, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. Mundane treasures are a bit of a mixed bag. I'm cognizant of the fact that thinking of flavorful treasures can be challenging, and even if it's not, it's still a lot more time consuming than writing down 1,000 silver pieces and calling it a day. So I think a good compromise here is maybe set aside part of your treasure hoard for a couple of flavorful items, and then the rest can be the more bog standard coins, gems, etc. If you aren't going to put any effort or flavor into your mundane items, I recommend spending that energy on your magical items. Your standard +1 sword or +1 shield just aren't that interesting. They don't incite a lot of emotion at the table when you receive them. Sure, if it's your first +1 weapon, then it's useful. Mechanically, you're at least 5% better off, assuming a D20 system. But dropping your 4th or 5th +1 weapon on the party, it'll get noted by the party treasurer and then never mentioned again. We have no idea what the mechanical bonus of Sting was, what it adds to attack or damage, but we do remember it because it glows blue when orcs and goblins are nearby. And perhaps lesser known, but it was made by the elves of Gondolin, the famed and fallen city of Middle-earth. And later it becomes a named weapon when Bilbo decides to give it a name, which is cool. You're much better off giving your +1 weapons a small minor benefit to make them more memorable to your players. I also prefer to to name my magic weapons that I'm adding into the dungeons that I'm stocking, but your mileage may vary on this. Sometimes it's fun to let the players come up with a name for the weapon. And if you're like me, coming up with interesting or cool weapon names probably takes up way more time than it should, and that's time that could be spent better else on some other prep work. But a named weapon does imply a history or something further to the weapon, which is possible adventure seeds or ideas for the players to learn more about. Instead of a +1 spear, you have the Shrieker, a +1 magical spear that emits a whistle-like scream that sounds like a giant rock, the giant bird and lord of the skies. The noise terrifies aerial creatures and anything that would be considered prey to a rock, and they will flee in terror upon hearing the shrieker emit its screaming sound. Or you could make it a penalty to the monster's morale check. Whatever you want to do, it's just adding a lot more flavor to a weapon than another +1 spear. In Bryce Lynch's Better Treasure article, he talks about how you can even reskin standard magic items that you would find in the magic item section of a Dungeon Master's Guide. He uses the example of, instead of a brooch of shielding, maybe you have a magic circlet that looks like a snake, and it animates and eats the magic missiles as they fly at you. That's a lot more flavorful and cool. And these small flavor things can really sort of help add and enhance to the fiction that you and your players are making at the table. If you're enjoying the flavor of this video, you can help me out by hitting the like button and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. All right, we've talked a bit about how to avoid making your treasure bland, but up to this point, we haven't used the treasure to advance your fiction forward in your campaigns. There's a few ways we can do this. We can use treasure to share lore or unlock secrets. We can use treasure to drive conflict and create new role-playing opportunities. And treasure can be used to change the nature of monsters and vice versa. When we have the players captivated for those few moments as they learn their treasure findings, we can take time to share a few snippets of lore with them that might interest them about our treasure. Even if you're handing out coins, you can describe what the coins look like. Maybe they came from a strange mint with the face of a long dead king they don't recognize, with a strange language on them. Small clues and hints like this offer the idea that perhaps there is an old or lost kingdom or city out there that the players might be able to adventure for. If we want to go back to Sting as an example, we can offer tidbits about the Gondolin make of the blade. Perhaps the players would become interested in Gondolin and try to find the ruined city for themselves. Sharing this information through Sting seems a lot cooler than an old wizard lecturing you about the fall of Gondolin. The other way you can use the treasure to share lore is to have NPCs react to the item as they see the players wield it or carry it around with them. What if a party finds a strange green-bladed sword, and later on they find themselves ambushed by a group of lizard folk that are about to attack them when they see this green blade and instead bow down in reverence to its wielder? That's a lot more interesting, and it raises a lot of questions. What significance does this green blade have to these lizard folk people? I like this method because it allows you to share some information with your players by showing it to them through role-playing opportunities rather than telling them about it. Rather than just reading a tome to get the information, they get to see this visceral reaction from a group or person that recognize the item. And that's a living and dynamic being that can answer questions about the items or the legend or mythos surrounding it. There may be other ways for your players to find out the same information or secrets that they learn through the treasure that they have, but this is one method that really feels cool to your players because it's something that they've earned through their past deeds, and sort of seeing the reactions to earning those items is really sort of nice and a great payoff for your players. Sometimes finally securing the treasure hoard is just the beginning of the problems for the players. You can do the obvious bandits want your gold thing. Anytime a big score is unearthed, news will travel fast, and there will be no shortage of scum and villainy that want to get their greasy hands on it. But that's a very on the nose conflict that you can present to the players. You can have things be a lot more subtle as well. You can also have your treasure present different types of conflicts to the players. Maybe two princely brothers are locked in a struggle for the right to rule the kingdom of Janthar. Well, the players just so happen to find the Janthian scepter in a dragon's treasure hoard. The one that possesses the scepter is going to have a much stronger claim on the right to rule, and so the players are thrust into this conflict. Questing for the MacGuffin is a major fantasy trope. Having the players find a MacGuffin and then figure out how to deal with the ramifications of that can be a nice little twist on that style of play. Think about different ways to add cultural, personal, or political ramifications to the treasure, and then let the players find it, and then find out what happens next. If you're using backstories in your game, treasure is a great way to tie in some details from your PC's backstories. It doesn't have to be anything major, but it could give them some attachment to different items they find. Maybe they find a shield with an older version of an insignia of their knightly order. Or perhaps they find the staff of the wizard's master's long-lost twin sister. If you aren't using backstories in your game, you can still tie the player's past actions into treasure they're finding. Maybe the PCs find something paid as tribute from one antagonist in the campaign to another antagonist. Alive or dead, that could add some flavor to an antagonist the party's already come across within your campaign. These don't have to be major things that set your players off on a grand story arc. They can just add richness and detail to your world, and it's up to you to decide the scale or magnitude of the impact of these different treasures that they find and go from there. Treasure can also change or be changed by monsters. The most obvious one here is the idea of the dragon's treasure hoard. I was reading an article by Augury Ignored, and they discussed the idea of these bonded treasure hoards. They note that this idea originates from Germanic folklore, but it was codified in 2nd edition's Council of Worms box set by TSR. The idea is that the dragon becomes bonded to its hoard, and as it sort of sleeps on its treasure hoard, it becomes more powerful as it gains this connection to this treasure. But should the dragon lose some of its treasure hoard, well, then it becomes weakened due to that bonded nature. This is an interesting idea because now not only do you have this treasure as a reward, but also a possible tactical option for more easily defeating the guardian of the treasure. Assuming you can steal some of its treasure and weaken it in the first place, which is probably no easy task. This reminded me of my time spent in 5th edition. Towards the end of my investment into 5e, I got Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. In there, I remember it talking about these hoard magic items. The idea that the longer the dragon has this item, it becomes further seeped in the dragon's magic, and it becomes more powerful the longer the dragon has it. So if the players get it, they have this powerful item for a while at least. The longer it's away from its hoard, it slowly starts to lose that magical connection over time. I did think that was a pretty neat idea. You can have this sort of reciprocal relationship where the monster needs its hoard, but the longer that the item sits in the monster's hoard, maybe it gains these magical powers or properties from the monster that possesses it. This doesn't have to be limited to dragons, of course. You can use lots of different types of monsters and sort of change the flavor and maybe composition of the items that they have to suit those monsters a little bit better. So you can use things like giants or fae, vampires, devils, etc. All those are great options to have a treasure hoard and give sort of distinct flavor and powers that those different types of creatures might have into the items that they've been collecting and possessing for a period of time. So hopefully those different ideas give you some sparks to turn that +1 sword into something a bit more flavorful or useful for the players. I think as game masters, we'd be wise to take that moment where everyone is listening and use that to convey different information about our campaign and our world that is actionable for the players and sort of helps drive that fiction forward. Treasure is a reward for an adventure well played, but it can also help seed new opportunities for adventure. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. It really does help the channel a lot. Consider checking out my monthly newsletter, Enchanted Nimbus. Thanks for watching. I'll see you back aboard the Earthmote again soon.